G'day, mate. 40 here. So I wanted to talk about the Netflix TV show Love is Blind. It reminds me so much of the pornography industry in that all participants in reality shows are stars, just like everyone who performs in a porn movie becomes a porn star. It's brutal, right? Absolutely brutal. So what do you think is more brutal on people? Getting naked on camera, getting physically naked on camera, or getting emotionally naked on camera? So in both industries, we're seeing the predatory success of the group strategy versus the individual strategy. Obviously, most people who choose to participate in reality shows or in porn movies are not the sanest, okay? Healthy, normal, natural, thriving people don't want to perform in porn movies. They don't want to appear on TV reality shows. And so what you're attracting are the desperate. And desperate people tend to make poor decisions. And the biggest problem with being desperate, the biggest problem with being abnormal, the biggest problem with having some kind of crippling addiction or crippling dysfunction that is disrupting your life is that only crippled people will hang out with you. Right? If you're so desperate as you are considering appearing on a TV reality show or in a porn movie, your biggest problem in life is that normal, happy, healthy, flourishing people will not form bonds with you, because healthy people don't like to form bonds with unhealthy people. And people who are moving ahead in life don't like to form bonds with those who are desperate. So TV reality shows like the pornography industry, right? It attracts the people who are the most desperate, who are the most empty inside, who are most yearning for something external to come along and to fill them up. And I mean, there's always been this component in TV, all right, since the 1950s, and then before that in radio show, bringing ordinary people on and getting them to spill their secrets. That's been a winning formula because you don't have to deal with uppity writers and producers and actors. So it's always been economically cost efficient. But you tend to deal with the desperate. And do we owe any moral obligations to the desperate? Should we be looking out for them? All right, big topic going on is Harrison Butker's speech. He's the kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Welcome back, or welcome
Let's get some insight here from Dennis Prager.
At the beginning of the hour at 00. So this Roman Catholic football star for the Kansas City Chiefs gave a commencement speech at a Catholic college. Oddly enough, it was about, in part, Catholic doctrine. So his first comments are quoted in the Washington Post. So you'll know this is not hardly a right-wing source that is giving these quotes. There's nothing wrong with them. The absence of men in the home is what plays a large role in the violence we see all around the nation. Everybody knows that, even Barack Obama. And I really emphasize the word even, said this. The 28-year-old, okay, I spoke about this. Now he writes, be unapologetic in your masculinity. Fight against the cultural emasculation of men. What I believe we have in the NFL, the president is an emasculated man. It's a perfect example of a lack of masculinity. He puts his finger up, sees where the winds of the mob are going, and then puts the NFL in that direction. Butker, whose team attracted the attention of increasing numbers of women and girls during the 2023 season, in which Taylor Swift frequently attended games to cheer on tight end Travis, is it Kelsey? It's pronounced Kelsey, right? Also had a message for female graduates. I think it is you, the women, who have had the most diabolic lies told to you, he said. Some of you may go on to lead successful careers in the world, but I would venture to guess that the majority of you are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world. That's anathema. The left hates that message. That, first of all, it has been, and I don't even believe in the devil, but it has been diabolic. What has been told to women, that is correct. It is the most depressed generation of young women in American history insofar as we have had any survey of the issue. That is, again, universally acknowledged, left and right. It is the most depressed generation of young women. The left is overwhelmingly responsible with its truly sick ideas that have been promulgated since I was in college. You don't need a man, you need a career. That's it. That's it. Then you're considered a strong woman. You see all these strong women at these demonstrations, whether it's George Floyd or pro-Hamas. By the way, I know some of you would say, oh, it's not pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian. Okay, what is the difference between pro-Hamas and pro-Palestinian today? There was no difference between pro-German and pro-Nazi during World War II. If you said you were pro-German in World War II, it meant you were pro-Nazi. Okay. I can tell you that my beautiful wife, Isabel, would be the first to say Her life truly started when she started living her vocation as a wife and as a mother. I'm on the stage today, able to be the man that I am because I have a wife who leans into her vocation. I'm beyond blessed with the many talents God has given me, but it cannot be overstated that all my success is made possible because a girl I met in band class back in middle school would convert to the faith, become my wife, and embrace one of the most important titles of all, homemaker. Oh my God. Yeah. Had he gotten up and just said F Trump for an hour, the NFL wouldn't have said a word. This, though, that it is the most beautiful term is homemaker. That is much worse than F Trump. Butker spoke of what he said were the dangers presented by the Church of Nice when it comes to issues such as diversity, equity, and inclusion. He also, the Church of Nice, I like that. That's right. That's, you know, my argument, how much bad nice people have done. I'm in the middle of a biography of the President James Garfield. And in it, Garfield is quoted at saying, I think it was in the 1870s, about the Southern whites. He said, they're nice in the morning and murder in the evening. It's a pretty powerful quote, isn't it? And he's talking about the murder of blacks. He also criticized dangerous gender ideologies, citing a recent Associated Press article on an immense shift in the Catholic Church in the United States, with many who had, quote, embraced the modernizing tide sparked in the 1960s, giving way to religious conservatives who believe the church has been twisted by change. Yeah. He also brought up diversity, equity, and inclusion, arguing, quote, the world around us says that we should keep our beliefs to ourselves whenever they go against the tyranny of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We fear speaking truth because now, unfortunately, truth is in the minority. That's right. Okay, well, anyway, that was what he spoke about. And now, I hope, I still don't see the NFL statement. Okay. All right, something has gone awry. No, send it in an email, and I'll, because I'm very curious. Did they actually say anything? Yeah, I really need to see it. I have no idea why I'm not seeing it where it should be seen, but that happens.
Come on, Dennis, get your act together.
The American national anthem being played. And did you send it by email? Oh, no, his speech?
Dennis.
Oh no, that's all right. I read it. It's I wish I've already quoted him, so I feel funny taking the listeners' time on.
Oh, come on, Dennis, get it together. Anyway, main topic is this new, this new controversy over the reality show on Netflix, Love is Blind, and supposedly is one of the most, elevated, uplifting, redemptive reality shows out there. But the picture of the show behind the scenes is devastating. So usually only desperate people perform in porn movies and go on reality TV shows. Now, desperate people are easy to exploit, right? And what do we owe our fellow citizens, all right? And who you are in love. And this show does everything it can to manipulate people into thinking that they're falling in love. And it's all about encouraging people to get married through various manipulation on the show. Who you are in love is who you really are, because love strips us, depending on what you do in love, but love strips us of our defenses. So if you have neediness inside of you, it will come out when you fall in love. If you have jealousy inside of you, or anger, right, or desperation, it will come out in love. If you like to use romantic infatuation or sexual fantasy to try to handle your anxiety, all right, that's going to get revealed in love. And so these reality shows, particularly ones like Love is Blind, where people are going on to fall in love and to get married, right, it strips you of your defenses. Now, I have some sympathy for the basic liberal idea that people are primarily individuals and that they should get to do anything that they want to do so long as it's not hurting someone else. So yeah, if people want to play tackle football, right, obviously playing tackle football is bad for most people. And so if people want to play tackle football, or if they want to appear on reality TV shows, I think they should have the right. But it just reveals all these important lessons about life, how a group strategy wins out over an individual strategy. The people who appear on TV shows like Love is Blind, all right, they're coming in with this individualist strategy, while the people who are running the shows and who essentially hold their well-being and their potential stardom and how they're going to be revealed to the public, hold that in their hands and have that power over people, right? They're employing a group strategy, all right? They have some history and they have some resources and they are able to manipulate the situation in their own advantage. So yeah, group strategy. You go up against a community, you are usually going to lose. Why do we have that saying, you can't fight City Hall, right? Because City Hall has a group strategy. And to the extent that you're an individual going up against a strong group, it's very difficult for you to win. Now, also, the other telling thing about these reality shows is that they bind the contestants so that they can't really reveal what's going on the shows, right? They can't criticize the shows. They can't reveal what's going on with the shows. All right. So if these reality shows were honorable, they would need to impose such harsh non-disclosure agreements on the participants, right? You'd get to see how the sausage was made. And if people are exempt from criticism, all right, they're going to behave badly. And the producers of reality shows are overwhelmingly exempt from criticism by the people who appear on their shows. One, because of the power that they hold over these people. And two, because of the non-disclosure agreements they force. So if you need to hide what you're doing, you are up to no good. Right, long New Yorker article about all this. And even a year ago, information about this show was coming out.
Season Love is Blind has become Netflix's biggest reality show. However, former contestants are coming forward, fighting back, complaining, and even suing the production company behind the show, alleging emotional warfare and neglected mental health on set. And honestly, at first, I sort of shrugged this off as to, well, duh, welcome to reality shows. But no, some of this stuff is legitimately shocking.
Okay,
welcome to Popcorn Planet. I am Andy Signorn. If you know me, you know I'm a reality TV junkie. I've seen many shows in my day. Look, I didn't believe it for a second. I was like, this is crazy. This show's nuts. This isn't going to create real love affairs. It's all just insane. But that's why we watch these shows, because we want insane drama, and I can't believe they're doing this moments. Let's keep it a buck, guys. That's why this show is popular, not because we actually want to see them find real love. I forget about all these contestants when the next season starts. But that's the sad reality of these reality shows, and you assume that the people know this going in. But this is a reminder that, no, we need to warn everybody. Reality.
So, yeah, if you're not prepared to stand up for yourself, then there needs to be someone in your life who will take responsibility for your decisions. And a large portion of our population is not capable of standing up for itself. And if you glorify in this victimhood identity where you are not sufficient to put up boundaries and so your own best interest, then you should appoint a guardian who will make these decisions for you. Because when you go up against a machine like Love is Blind, you're just going to get ripped apart.
Reality shows do prey on their contestants. Now, is that illegal? I don't think so. That's just all part of the production process. They want to create these shows to create the drama, to create these big, big moments. And yeah, they're going to isolate you. They're going to prey on your weaknesses. They're going to do whole deep dives on your psyche to figure out how to twist and push buttons to get you to lose it on the show so they get the waterworks. That's what these shows do. And yeah, it's awful. But I assumed we all knew this, and that's why you signed up for it. And like an example, The Bachelor.
So this reminds me of the earlier, more successful days of this show. I would allow anyone to come on the show, and I would allow people to frequently make disclosures and to make comments that were completely against their own best interest. And then I started feeling increasingly bad about the negative life results that some people had who participated in the show. So I became increasingly selective about who I allow on the show. I realized that 99% of people who want to appear on the show, that this would not be good for them. Because when people come online, like on a show like this, and just start talking, they frequently disclose things that are against their own self-interest, and they put forward an image of themselves that's incompatible with reality. And it's just like a type of strong drink that people can't handle. Now, it was tremendously entertaining, but it was often of a train wreck variety. And so becoming more morally serious and more morally sober and more empathic and considering the repercussions for people who might appear on the show, it drained a huge amount of the drama from the show, right? People tune into a show like this for information, for community, right? For connection and for spectacle. And the spectacle quotient of this show is now about 5% of what it was in 2018, because I started feeling increasingly bad about the people who'd come on the show and, say things against their own interests.
They do have therapists. From what I've learned, there are therapists on call. They have doctors on call and things that do attempt to help. Doesn't mean
Okay, New Yorker here. Is Love is Blind a toxic workplace? Reality TV show contestants are barely paid, and the experience can feel like abuse. Former cast members of Netflix's mega hit are speaking out and calling for solidarity. So only people who come from a background of individualism, all right, who see the world through that classical liberal sense that we're primarily individuals rather than members of a nation or a group or a tribe, right, could really feel at ease in participating in a TV reality show. Because if you have vital connections to a concrete community, they are rarely going to be thrilled, right, with you, appearing in a porn movie or appearing on a reality show.
they're not still manipulating and doing what they can when they can, but they have buttoned up the operation a little bit more, so it's not like it's completely.
All right, back to the New Yorker. The format of Love is Blind sounded outlandish. 15 men and 15 women gathered in Los Angeles. They are ensconced in individual pods. They flirt with strangers through a wall. After a few days of this speed courtship, contestants fall in love, and some get engaged, and some get married. And so the show's producers are Kinetic Content. And the producers say Love is Blind is not some sleazy, guilty pleasure like Temptation Island. It's a sincere experiment in human intimacy. So participants are placed on a digital fast designed to liberate them from all distractions, including physical appearance, so that they can form deeper, more lasting bonds with a partner. So the producers aren't looking for clout chasers, but for emotionally mature adults, people ready to commit for marriage. Okay, emotionally mature adults, right? People ready to commit for marriage are not going to appear on a reality TV show. I think the producers believe what they're saying, but it's absolutely an absurd claim.
Egregious. Well, apparently, according to these accusations, Love is Blind doesn't have that. They were pushing people to the brink of their anxieties, but also suicidal thoughts. That's not okay. The biggest shock to me, I want to start, there's a lot of accusations, and some of them which I'm like, whatever. Yeah, you're sleep deprived. Welcome to Hollywood. That is a legitimate thing that happens on all production sets.
They work them about 20 hours a day. I mean, they use the worst of court tactics on TV shows like Love is Blind. All right. So people find the isolation startling and disturbing, right? Your phone is taken away. You're confined to a hotel room. You're forbidden to speak to other cast members, and your phone's taken away, and there's no internet access. All right. You're going on a digital fast. All right. But you can't talk to family and you can't talk to friends, but you're provided with a ton of alcohol. Then when the show starts shooting, all right, it shoots about 20 hours a day, right? The cast has to be camera ready at 8 a.m., usually doesn't return to their hotel rooms until 2 or 3 a.m. So late night dates are optional, but there are strong incentives to do them. If you fail to make a connection or the producers lose interest in your story, you could get cut. You're paid far less than minimum wage. All right, you're working for up to 20 consecutive hours. Right, there are no union protections. Right, the producers of the show give you a journal to write in, along with a schedule of dates with other contestants, a list of questions to explore with a theme for each day. And then you're filmed relentlessly, right? And the producers get to read your journal. They get a psychological profile of you, so they know how to manipulate you to produce drama.
Stay up all hours. You had 20 hours a day. Imagine working it and not just sitting there eating food and talking to somebody. Imagine having to be a PA, a production system's busting their ass for 20 hours a day, and you have to actually do it. No. So there's things in here that I do think are like, yeah.
So you'll be brought back onto the show, and you'll be asked to talk in a very intimate way with people who have had panic attacks, people who are suicidal, people who are threatening to kill people. All right, so this one woman had a panic attack. She downed a bottle of wine. She locked herself in a closet. She was sobbing. She was paranoid that the room had hidden cameras. And very likely there were hidden cameras or hidden recording devices. She refused requests to put her microphone on. She said she wanted to leave. She said that she felt like killing herself. None of this wound up on air. Instead, viewers saw the couple sitting stiffly in their bed having a tense argument. And she just says she doesn't trust anyone right now. And finally, the guy realized that he's been set up. He pulls his own microphone off. He throws it away. But to the viewers, it just looks like a dramatic lover's quarrel. All right, 4 years later, after the couple finally says, I do, and they appear in a cast reunion special, they file for divorce, right? And the repercussions of the show are just absolutely brutal for them.
Yeah, whatever. These aren't complaints. However, the biggest shock to me, which I would...
All right, people are separated to spark a conflict, manipulated rather than supported during scary mental health crises. And given the crispness of the sound quality in the version that aired, right, there's good reason to believe that they had hidden microphones in the room. So what looked like a romantic adventure increasingly becomes seen as a cruel trick, an unethical exercise in which the people in charge, the producers of Love is Blind, use isolation, sleep deprivation, and emotional manipulation to control their subjects. Right, and you're getting paid less than minimum wage.
Which I couldn't believe it as I read it. The contracts stipulate that cast members must pay $50,000 in damages to the production company if they leave the show early without producer approval. Now, take that for a second and think about it, because I never actually knew anything like this was in a contract. This makes it harder to approve of the show and what they're doing. You're going through this pressure. You're being pressured to marry somebody. You don't want to be there anymore. Oh, if you leave, we're charging you $50,000 because you just wrecked our show. Like, I understand what they're saying because they're investing, yada, yada, but these are human beings. Now, nobody has to marry anybody. You can just say no. You can sit there and be a bore on the show and just not participate anymore. It doesn't say you have to do what they tell you to do. You just have to participate in the show. You can't leave the show. So for me, if I want to get out, I would just stop performing, right? That's what you do. If you want to get off these shows, how do you beat this? Don't talk. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to give really short answers, be boring. I don't know. I don't really like you. Just be deflated and ruin the editing. And to me, maybe there's a clause that would say, well,
okay, reality shows have been around for 75 years because they are cheap. So shortly after the Second World War, radio networks began airing audience participation programs. Now we have a juggernaut of reality shows, and most reality TV crew members work brutal hours for low pay with no benefits on the margins of Hollywood. And for the people they film, the situation is starker. Right? There's never been any sort of coordinated labor movement for reality cast members. Right? Most people don't see going on a reality show as work, but you're going to be expected to work 20 hours a day. Right? So for most people, they just see going on a reality show as a different category of behavior. It's some gonzo volunteerism. It's an audition for fame. It's an extreme sport. People agree to put themselves at risk, in danger, physically and emotionally, for an adventure, for a chance at future opportunities, for a chance at fame. And if something bad happens to reality stars, all right, they've signed up for it. And the standard contract makes it impossible for cast members to complain or even to talk about how the show was made. Right? If you can't talk about how the show was made, if you can't complain, then the producers are just going to get away with murder, because human nature is not basically good. And if you forbid criticism or even openness or revelation about how the sausage is built in your industry, then it's just going to be filled with abuse. So in an individualist society, right, every transaction has to be negotiated and agreed to. In a corporate society like Orthodox Judaism, right, once you're in the tribe, right, then most questions are already answered. So one of the great things about living in Orthodox Judaism or in any corporate culture is that most questions are already settled. People know what the rules are. People know the expected standards of behavior, and you don't have to negotiate every kind of transaction. But in a highly individualist, brutally transactional world, right, higher IQ people are obviously going to do better, but all sorts of people are going to, end up hurt. So reality show members float in a strange kind of limbo. They're not documentary subjects. If you're subject of a documentary, you usually agree to be filmed for free, but you have control over the hours that you work, how much access you offer. And reality TV show members are not professional actors. They don't memorize scripts. They're not professionals, right? They're bona fide amateurs. They appear on screen without any industry protections. Now, there are a few reality shows that are covered by SAG-AFTRA. I'm a member of SAG-AFTRA. Got the Celebrity Apprentice and Celebrity Big Brother, but most reality shows are not. And so now we've got a movement to restore some dignity to reality show contestants. But what's the best way to give people dignity? Government intervention, government rules, lawsuits? Yeah, I think there's a role to play for that. But the best way to give people dignity is a sense of connection with each other, being part of a nation, a community, or a tribe, right? That's the most powerful source of identity that gives people dignity over the past few hundred years. It developed first in England, then moved to France, and then moved around the world. People feel that they're part of an extended family, a project that's bigger than themselves. And by virtue of their membership in the American nation or the English nation or the Australian nation or the Japanese nation, that's where they get their sense of dignity. And it also encourages people to, treat each other a little more decently.
You tanked it because you changed your persona. That's not who you were. I don't know, but this idea that they have to force you to be there or charge you 50 grand, that is really dangerous. That is, and as a psychologist here, it's extreme, harmful to mental health. Why would you want to keep someone who's coerced to be on your show? What kind of entertainment is that going to be? It's just drama. But that's what these shows thrive on. So when I saw this, I had to step back and go, all right, that's not a good look.
They didn't tell me she had a panic attack. They didn't tell me I'm done.
Hey.
No, I'm done. Yeah, this is where I was like, I'm done filming because I realized kind of what had happened. They didn't tell me she had a panic attack. They didn't tell me anything.
But they knew all.
Yeah, I just almost accepted the abuse and the exploitation because I found Danielle.
I didn't at all expect what actually went down and what happened, which was quite a bit more psychological torture, manipulation, and just basically exploitation, which there was no way to prepare for that.
A lawsuit was the last thing that I wanted. This is the last place I saw myself being when I started this process.
They are in control of every element of your life. You're put in a hotel room and you don't have a key. You don't have access to water.
Right. This is like joining a cult. All right. Happiness usually correlates with a sense of agency, that you have the ability to steer your life. I mean, it's usually a really bad idea to turn over the control of your life to other people, particularly to strangers who just have no incentive to treat you well. Reality TV producers essentially look at their contestants, their performers as commodities that they just manipulate and use and abuse without any consideration for the implications of what they're doing.
Unless you want to drink it out of the faucet or the shower. We're all just sitting there, not being fed on any kind of regular cadence, but definitely being fed a lot of alcohol. My body was just exhausted and dehydrated and hungry.
So I did a lot of extra work in Hollywood, and I became a member of the Screen Actors Guild. Overall, I was treated really well. So when you have that kind of union protection, you are treated well.
There's 3 blueberries. You eat them sparingly.
I lost 15 pounds in 3 weeks from the pods in Mexico. And looking at my suit, I had that thing tailored like the week before coming. Yeah. And
Like a perfect fit, right?
like a perfect fit, yeah.
No, it's like your first suit out of undergrad, right? You just go to Macy's and pick
up whatever's on sale.
We didn't have any autonomy at all. Not only did they take our phones, they took our wallets, they took our IDs, they took our passports, all in the same instance, without telling us ahead of time this was going to happen.
And we were filming 18 to 20 hours a day. The only time we weren't being filmed was when the union crews swapped out for a new crew because they had met their maximum for the day.
You never see daylight unless you're allowed to use the bathroom, which is a trailer outside. They keep you in the state where you really have no idea how much time has transpired. It's one of those things where, looking back on it, if someone told me it was a month, I might have believed them.
When Danielle and I were in Mexico,
So if the producers are as genuinely proud of this product as they claim, right, then they should release the performers from the NDAs and allow for criticism. If you do not allow the people that you film to criticize you, then obviously you can't be proud of what you're doing.
she got sick with a stomach issue. They came in with this COVID protocol and gave Danielle a COVID test, which she was negative. And then they said, well, due to protocol, you might still turn positive within the next 24 hours, so we can't film you the rest of the day, which was the day of the couples reveal party, which is where all the couples get together for the first time with Nick and Vanessa Lachey, and everybody meets together for the first time. So I went for 2, maybe 3 hours, and when I was finally finished there filming, they brought me back to the room and said,
So do you live a life where most everything needs to be negotiated? I mean, that's an exhausting life. Now, I have not negotiated as well as I should have. I would not want other people to have my transactional track record because I've pretty much done things on a mates basis. I've pretty much usually done deals with people who I thought were mates, but then sometimes I change, they change. Sometimes people have become addicted to drugs and alcohol, or I've taken an unpopular position and lost, everyone that we had in common. So if you have a lot of people in common, usually that's a pretty good incentive for other parties to treat you well in a deal. But then you may violate the norms of the group, such as when I started writing a blog about Dennis Prager's show, right? I lost my entire community of friends in Los Angeles back in late 1997, early 1998, because I broke the code that everyone I had in common with Dennis Prager, right, obviously sided with the person with more prestige and more power, and they thought I'd broken the code by saying anything remotely critical about him.
to me in the hallway, you're mic'd, Danielle isn't, so stay close to her. She's sitting on the end of the bed. And when you go in there, talk to her about the couples reveal party. I go in there and I sit down on the end of the bed, and nobody had told me that she had just had a panic attack.
Because I had 3 hours to sit here and not do anything but be in my head. I sat in the closet. I locked the door. I shut.
So the producers are incentivized to manipulate people for drama, right? The more drama, the more compelling the content, the more eyeballs and the more money they make.
This, and I sat in the closet and cried. I had to be here alone by myself.
I told you I didn't
For
have
hours.
to go. Do you believe me? Do you trust me?
I'm not kidding. I don't trust anything right now.
Yeah, this is where I was like, I'm done filming. I threw the mic and was like, we're not filming and we're leaving. It's all manufactured at that point because this isn't a real life situation where I'd go to.
Okay, Art Bell's got a good question in the chat. Is it the moral thing to do to fund or support, subscribe to Netflix since they are leftist degenerates? Do I need a journalist's excuse as a hall pass? I don't think we need to deform our lives so that we never spend money, right? Even in the smallest, most micro transactions that support a different hero system, different politics from our own. So if you get benefit from Netflix, subscribe to Netflix or any product, even if it's made by people on the left. I don't think you should be employing political litmus tests before you buy a product.
To a party without her, come home after she had a panic attack, and then have a conversation about what happened at the party without talking about the panic attack.
They have a product they're trying to make and a product they're trying to sell, and we are the raw materials that they're crafting to create that product. And there are no regulations or guidelines about how they can treat the raw material to create that final product.
This whole entire experiment is designed to break you down to your most unhealed.
Right, it's really bad for a lot of people. Some very intelligent, very savvy people are able to use this process seemingly to their own advantage, just as you could argue that various porn stars have used the pornography industry to their advantage. But most people are obviously harmed by participating in pornography, and most people are obviously harmed by participating in reality TV shows. I mean, imagine if Alexander Technique teachers made their clients sign non-disclosure agreements so that their clients could never publicly criticize them or reveal what goes on in a lesson. Right? That would not be good for the integrity and the righteousness of Alexander Technique teacher training. All right, it's the possibility that people will publicly criticize you that adds incentives that you behave in an upright fashion. And to make it impossible for these reality show participants to criticize you, in addition to the enormous power that you hold in how you reveal them to the public, all right, it obviously predisposes reality show producers to terrible behavior.
And most damaged version of yourself, so that they can exploit you for free labor, essentially, or labor at $7.14 an hour, which is what you break down the amount of hours and what we made, that's what you make per hour. So a lot of time when I talk about the exploitation, people online through comments, DMs, Reddit threads will say, well, you signed up for this. So it's difficult in the moment to leave the show when you know that you signed a contract saying that you can be sued for $50,000 in damages. Here, I'll actually read this whole part. I agree that $50,000 is a reasonable estimate of the amount of damages producer is likely to suffer in the event of any discontinuation, considering all of the circumstances existing as of the date of this agreement. So $50,000 if you decide mentally you can't handle this and you need to go home.
In the back of my mind, I was thinking, this isn't right. Something is wrong here. This doesn't feel like it should be allowed. This doesn't feel like it should be legal. I filed a lawsuit against Kinetic and Netflix on behalf of Love is Blind cast members and Ultimatum cast members in the summer of 2022, alleging that they violated California.
So if you participate in a pornography video, much of the population, if not most of the population, will cease to regard you as fully human. And if you participate in reality TV shows, right, most of the population won't take your complaints very seriously. Right? If you make any complaint about your pornography experience or your reality TV show experience, right, it looks like you're weak, that you're just spilling, bad motivated gossip.
Labor law. The way that these production companies have been getting around labor laws is they have been classifying cast members as contract employees. If an employer does not have control over where they work, how they work, or their means of production, that's a contract laborer. But these production companies control all of that. In fact, they control it far.
Yeah, the production companies have lawyers, right? They have organization. They have a group strategy. And they have incentives to manipulate you into creating drama. Drama is usually bad for you. And to be publicly humiliated is absolutely devastating. So the participants in these shows all operate under the shadow of severe non-disclosure agreements, right? Contractual clauses that make it legally risky for reality shows to discuss any part of the production.
Far more than any normal employer. And if it's true that we should have been full-time employees, all of a sudden, all of these protections come into play, right? Meal breaks, rest breaks, overtime pay, all of these things come into play, all of which...
So one of these guys talked about his short time on the show. He felt caught in the current of the pods, right? That period when participants have marathon vulnerable conversations with strangers, right? You're getting vulnerable with strangers, and the people in charge have an incentive to manipulate you for their own ends, and that's unlikely to be good for you, right? People flip out.
Were violated. Interestingly enough, while they classified us...
So prior to the show, he considered himself a stoic, level-headed, chill, happy person. In the aftermath, he was traumatized, angry, and confused. Right? There was a 12-hour period in his hotel room that he couldn't account for. The best way I can describe it is some vague, dark shadow of despair. The psychologist told him it sounded as though he'd entered a fugue state.
As contract laborers in the contract, they filed...
So the guy initially reached out to the company to share his concerns. He was ignored. Then he said he was getting a lawyer. Then the company, Kinetic's lawyer told him to F off.
W-2s on our behalf to the IRS. And
Right, thousands of people have gone through this, and the overwhelming majority are the worse off for the experience. Right, the genre is a shell game. It is a revenue mitigation strategy. The psychological manipulation techniques that reality show producers use are similar to the techniques used by courts, which also cut people off from the world. And the general public does not take this harm seriously. And you have an arbitration clause embedded in contracts which mandates that any complaints against the show be settled privately. So the public usually doesn't know when something awful happens on set.
Just to be very clear, W-2s are only for full-time employees. You don't file W-2s for contract laborers. What that means to me, my personal opinion on this, is they either lied to us.
Right, they're filming up to 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, get paid about $7 an hour.
Or they lied to the IRS about our classification as full-time employees. Within a week of the lawsuit being filed and some of the media attention going out about it, I had 50 to 60 cast members from all sorts of shows, all reaching out to me and thanking me for pushing this forward. Just the reactions from the cast members that have reached out, they're very, very afraid. A lot of them don't even want to go on anonymously because they feel like the context or the content of an anonymous message would be enough to identify them. I mean, that's the level of...
So the shows claim that they screen people, but the screening's not particularly rigorous. Often criminally inclined, dysfunctional, antisocial people tend to dominate these shows.
Year that exists here. I founded UCAN in April of 2023, and UCAN stands for Unscripted Cast Advocacy Network. UCAN came to be pretty early on after the lawsuit because...
And people stay on these shows no matter how awful they are because of the sunk cost fallacy, all right? If your story never gets told, right, what did you suffer for? So cast members tend to get manipulated to complete the filming, even if it's an absolute horror for them.
I realized that the lawsuit was only going to be a piece of the puzzle, and it is a very important piece of the puzzle. But it wasn't going to solve everything we needed to solve, because ultimately what we're trying to do is prevent this from happening to other people. I've been good friends with Nick ever since we first met in the lounge, actually, during production. We just clicked. He decided he wanted in, and he wanted all in.
The UCAN Foundation, it has two parts to it that we're really trying to focus on. One, we're trying to support reality cast TV members pre, during, and post-show with legal services if they need them. On the mental health side, we have
a good few sentences here in this New Yorker profile. For decades, reality fame was the monkey's paw of Hollywood, right? The monkey's paw, the monkey would put his paw in to get something shiny that he really wanted, but then he couldn't withdraw it out of the hole. So you became globally famous, but flat broke, right? You were a household name, you were harassed by haters, you had no prospect of an entertainment career. Then the Kardashians blazed a new path, and soon afterward, Instagram opened up the path to anyone. So when Love is Blind began airing in 2020, all right, reality fame became an intensifier. It was like squirting accelerant on the flames of social media. So even low-level stars could cut branding deals. Bigger stars could make a fortune as full-time influencers. So some very smart, savvy people are able to manipulate their way through what is overwhelmingly a destructive industry. And so these rare opportunities amount to golden handcuffs, right? They're as effective as any non-disclosure agreement. They keep former contestants tied to companies such as Kinetic, jockeying for favored status. And though only a tiny number make it big, the opportunities dangle in front of the other cast members if they just play ball. Right? If you go on these shows, you're not paid anything. You go through all this trauma. Suddenly you're presented with an opportunity to actually make money out of it. What would you not be willing to do?
A network of over 200 mental health professionals across a number of states that have reached out to join this network. We are going to fight for mental health support before, during, and after production, the way that Kinetic promises it but delivers none of it.
For every one reality TV cast member that the public knows about, there's probably 100 that they've never heard of, that have gone through the same traumatic experience, that that come out of these shows worse off financially, worse off mentally, and worse off emotionally.
And this New Yorker article says the reality TV producers I met are sharp observers skilled at getting strangers to open up. Right, their profession very similar to that of journalists, but they work inside a bubble. They hone skills that to an outsider look sketchy, but because they control the editing, all right, the manipulative, dastardly things that they do usually are not revealed. One contestant says that Love is Blind is like therapy, but bad therapy. So a producer's job is to bond with the cast while exploiting conflicts among them and then turn those raw emotions into story beats. So some get cajoled, some get bullied. Compartmentalization is key. One producer who now works in hospitality says that during his reality TV heyday, every other season I'd have a moral come to Jesus moment. Then he'd get pulled back in to make more money, and because the job was a thrill. But once he left the industry, he saw it in a different light. All of reality TV needs to be unionized. And the trickiest part is how the industry views the people it films. To us as producers, the people we filmed are just a piece of a machine. They are just commodities.
They have nowhere to go for support. We've talked to cast members from America's Next Top Model from 15 years ago, and they've said the same things. It is at the very least, it is always a message and a narrative of abuse, exploitation, food deprivation, sleep deprivation, gaslighting. That is consistent across what everybody says, but it can get more extreme. Right now, the bottom line is, it is far more profitable to produce these unethically in an exploitative way than to treat cast members like people. And until somebody steps in and flips that equation around, whether it's with laws or whether it's with unionizing or whether it's just public interest, that's not going to change.
This is unregulated capitalism in the entertainment industry. It's unregulated. Nobody has rights, nobody's protected. And that's why the UCAN Foundation exists, because we're going to force the change.
Thank you so much for watching.
Okay, let me get my act together here. Play a little burst from Jesse Waters. What's he talking about?
The prosecutor misled this jury.
It's a higher degree of a felony than what Donald Trump is charged with.
Michael Cohen is a liar, and now we know he's a thief.
The trail of broken promises still leave black communities behind. He'd be a black man who loves his country, even if it doesn't love him back in equal measure.
Biden tells blacks that Americans don't love them.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
Why are women so angry? Plus,
don't let nobody tell you that you don't need no money and money don't buy happiness, because listen to me, it sure does.
It only took 19 days, but we finally have a crime in the Trump trial. Michael Cohen, not only a liar, today we found out he's a thief. Alvin Bragg's star witness, in another gruesome day of cross-examination, confessed to larceny, admitting he stole $60,000 from his old boss. Quote, "You stole from the Trump organization, correct?" With Cohen responding with a "yes, sir," as former President Donald Trump stared on, shaking his head. Even CNN's heads were shaking.
This is a bomb. This is really important. This is a bomb dropped in the middle of the prosecution's case.
They appear to have caught Cohen in another lie.
This has given such ammunition as to possibly fatally undermine the prosecution's case.
I have to say, I'm still kind of reeling from the revelation that Michael Cohen stole money from the Trump organization.
If Jake's reeling, what do you think Bragg's doing? Trump's in a conspiracy with a guy stealing his money? Trump just became a victim. That's how the jury sees it.
Okay, that's a pretty lame analysis. All right, another type of reality TV show is the world of live streaming. And one of the kings of live streaming is Destiny. So let's go back to Decoding the Gurus. Here's their analysis of Destiny.
Teenager, you'd probably say maybe he was a teenager.
Yeah, this got to that, a young person. But yeah, it's all approached in exactly the same way. So the impression I get is that Destiny is always on the same speed. He approaches all of these things with exactly the same energy. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. A slight contrast to that. So, like, I completely agree with you that there is that issue. And just, I think for the people listening to us, you do have to realize, like, this is a different world, right? Because you're never going to have the situation of Matt and me having a conversation with the various orbiters that we've ended up having sex with and litigating, you know, like who washes their penis appropriately on stream. It's not going to happen. But with Destiny, he's going to be on Piers Morgan debating with Ben Shapiro. And you won't have that with them either, because that would be a huge controversy if Jordan Peterson was on stream talking about like his ability to give head. So there is a difference here, and that's like a side point to what I wanted to mention. But you said about it being consistent, right? And here's the one thing I want to say is that
okay, so what goes on these Destiny live streams is, I think, far less heinous than what goes on a Netflix show like Love is Blind, right? There aren't people with nearly as much power over you. You're not having to sign NDAs. So however heinous this is, you know, however filthy much of what Destiny traffics in is, compared to reality TV shows, it is several moral cuts above that.
Like we talked about him modulating in terms of, you know, the way that he interacts with people. So I think this is both an illustration of this and an illustration of the dynamics we're talking about in regards to there being no boundaries with the streaming audience.
So the worst thing about rolling in the muck, whether it's on a reality TV show in the porn industry or on a live stream, is that people who don't like muck are going to distance themselves from you, which will leave you increasingly isolated and marginalized, and you'll no longer be living in the center of the herd, if indeed you once were, and you will be much more vulnerable to the tough things that come along in life. Right? When you get sick, you won't have a community helping you. If you lose a job, you won't have a community helping you. So that's the big downside with choosing to roll in the dirt, whether on a live stream, on reality TV show, or in sex work.
In a way. I mean, there are boundaries, right? Like there are things that he will kick people for, or he doesn't. But in comparison to a normal person, there are no boundaries. And he did an interview with a journalist, Ryan Grimm, from The Intercept, who's essentially takes a very strong pro-Palestinian stance, but also has been very critical around claims about rape on October 7th. Now, I'm no fan.
So things like, you know, this filth on live streams, this filth on reality shows, or the filth in sex work, right? It all depends upon this liberal worldview that we create meaning and purpose and morality in our own heads, that we live buffered identities, and so that what we do doesn't contaminate the people around us, doesn't hurt our neighbors, doesn't hurt our communities, right? And it's usually people who are most disconnected from family and community who will fall down into the gutter like this. So the right-wing conception, the traditional conception, the religious conception, the tribal and nationalist conception is that meaning and purpose and morality, right, is decided outside of us, and we can choose to live a life of duty to this hero system that is propagated by our family, our extended family, our tribe, our nation, our religion, right? If we accord with this hero system, this system of right and wrong, this morality system, right, that exists outside of us and independent of us, then we can have a good life. So the traditional right-wing approach to life is your first obligation is to do your duty. And the classical liberal left-wing approach to life is follow your bliss. These are two very different approaches to life, but only one of them predisposes people to end up in the porn industry or the reality TV show industry or trafficking in filth on some live stream, right? The classical liberal left buffered identity where what I do, it doesn't harm anyone else so long as it's legal, where I can decide what's right and wrong, I can decide meaning and purpose on my own, right? That's a liberal left-wing perspective. Very different from the traditional perspective, the tribal perspective, the nationalist perspective, the religious perspective, that right and wrong and meaning and purpose exist outside of us.
And of Ryan Grimm, also a big advocate of the lab leak incidentally. But regardless, I'm not going to litigate all the things they had in their conversation. Just, he went on Destiny's stream. They had a debate, right? And then Brian Grimm gets off the call. Now, in a normal environment, that would be the stream ends, right? The content is finished. But Destiny then talks to his audience about the interview, right? So
I'm just looking at this gorgeous Fox News legal analyst, Kerry Urban. And I remember I was in a relationship with an equally attractive and highly accomplished Jewish woman. And I asked her, how much of your self-esteem depends upon your looks? And she said 100%. So obviously, Kerry Urban, the Fox News legal editor, wouldn't be the Fox News legal editor if she wasn't gorgeous. And she's willing to do this transaction. But it comes with the enormous downside that that your job depends upon your looks and that you gained this job in large part based on your looks. Now, I could be wrong. All right, she may be the premier legal mind who is available for this position, but you look at Donald Trump and how he selects his lawyers. All right, he tends to select the best-looking lawyers, and frequently they don't seem terribly competent. So, do you think Kerry Urban is simply the greatest legal mind available for this position, or was she the best-looking and most attractive and compelling legal mind available for this position? And if you recognize that you're willing to make this transaction, what does that do to you inside?
Here's him talking about Brian Grimm.
I feel like you should push him to make a really solid claim about the conspiracy he obviously believes. It's too easy for someone to turtle up and just be infinitely skeptical. Yeah, I tried to do that in the beginning. I actually thought about that before the conversation. I feel like I have like a very... what's happening is I'm treating these people with kid gloves. This is the reason why I said I don't like everybody in my subreddits. I was like, oh, he's not gonna go mainstream. He's not gonna go mainstream. And then I'd always say, like, I don't really like the mainstream stuff as much. The reason why is because when I'm having debates with like Tonka Saw or Andy Warski or Brittany Venti or even like Lauren Southern or even like Max and right? Like by the end of this combo, we can really get into like what we're talking about. Like, oh, you're do you believe this or do you believe that? Right? It seems screaming, it seems crazy. And people will say like, oh, this is just debate pedophilia, debate pervertry. But in a way, I feel like it's more honest. And I think...
And Destiny is an amazing live streamer, highly intelligent. And success as a live streamer depends on the ability to simply share almost everything that just goes through your head. So one layer of intimacy is to simply talk about what's happening, right? Just to share information. Then a deeper level of intimacy is to share about your opinion or how you feel about what's been happening. But then an even deeper level of intimacy, which is what Destiny offers his viewers, is to share what he's thinking and feeling as he goes, right? Right in the moment, he's sharing what's going through his head and his heart. And that's what makes a compelling live streamer.
I feel like it's a little bit more telling than some of the mainstream stuff where like when I'm chatting with these people, I have to be so careful because he was already getting like pretty triggered.
Okay, yeah. So have the debate, you have the discussion, then afterwards you do a bit of a postmortem with your audience.
Yeah, but also that fact where he's like, people are in his audience are talking about him going mainstream and it's gonna like chill his edge, but he's like, no, I'm not gonna do that because I don't like how constrained I have to be in dealing with mainstream people because like with the online streamers, it can be chaotic. We can be screaming, we can, argue and whatnot. But like when it's a mainstream journalist, I have to think about like how much pushback they'll take before they flip out or this kind of thing. And he talks a little bit more about this.
Like as soon as in the beginning where he's like, as a journalist, and I'm trying really hard, I was like, are you trying to little bro me, dude? Like, what do you mean as a journalist? Like, as a journalist, let me tell you about 82 in Lebanon, okay? Let me tell you about like, what do you know about on 82 besides Twitter headline? What do you mean? Let me tell you about he had no idea why the phalanges were so bad about.
Right, so Destiny has incredible access to what's going on inside of himself. He's highly self-aware, and that's what makes him so compelling a live streamer because he both has access to these immediate reactions, these visceral reactions, and then he's willing to spill them.
About the PLO and everything. He had no idea about the assassination of the Christian president and all this shit. He didn't know any of this shit. But he's trying to cite Twitter headlines at me. don't quote the old text at me, okay? I was there when the wiki was written, all right? But anyway, I can already tell that he's like on the verge of breaking as I'm asking questions. And if this was like an old school like blood sports debate, right? If it was an old school blood sports debate, then we could have that conversation where I could just scream at him. Like, tell me what you think happened. Do you think the Jews are trying to, concoct propaganda, invent mass rapes, like blah, 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 like, but if I break somebody too much like that, then, it's over.
I mean, I can understand where he's coming from, where he could feel that those edgy.
Yeah, Destiny's exactly right. If you humiliate people who you bring on your show, right, they're not going to come back. And other people will take a warning from that. And so it will restrict your access to guests. Online
type debates are more authentic, even if you're arguing with an anti-Semite or a neo-Nazi or something. But is it the argument that he dismissed, isn't it kind of true that it is kind of a bit porny? Like it is a bit voyeuristic. It does give a thrill to hear people say terrible things and then to shout at them and so on. Like, isn't that somewhat true? Isn't that part of the appeal?
Yeah, I think so. And I think we haven't talked about it yet, but maybe now is a good time. One of the criticisms that he often gets is around like his interaction with Red Pilled or, Nick Fuentes, who's this.
So Destiny earns, what, $500,000+ a year. I mean, he is raking it in because he's so good at what he does. And he is shrewdly monetized it.
Essentially like a neo-Nazi, right? Yeah. And
well, these guys on Decoding the Gurus, all right, they wouldn't object if someone wanted to interview a communist or a Marxist, right? They wouldn't even bring it up. So why is it that this other side of the political spectrum should not be allowed access to the public square?
Debating with him. And now let me see if I can show you how Destiny justifies that. Okay, so, well, one thing, first of all, is that I do think he does a good job of outlining why that sort of shit appeals to people, right? So he explains it like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've made really good strides in society bolstering a lot of different types of minorities. So be it women or people of color or LGBT people. But it always feels like on the backs of all those movements, we always have to make sure everybody knows how much we hate white people or we want to kick down.
Well, you don't make strides for one group without reducing the status and privileges of another group, right? Destiny is talking as though all these great strides were made for minorities and for gays and lesbians and trans without it inherently taking away from traditional moral strictures, social cohesion, social trust, the traditional understanding of freedom of association and the rights of private property. Right, you don't get to add. This is such a shallow perspective that he's giving here, as though you could just add on rights for groups, and it wouldn't come at any cost to the wider majority. Right, that's the liberal perspective that we're in this march towards ever increasing levels of freedom and dignity for all of our fellow citizens. But increasing the freedom and dignity of some groups always comes at the expense of freedom and dignity of other groups. So, for example, if you prohibit racial discrimination, then you are reducing the traditional rights to freedom of association, the traditional rights to hire who you want to, the traditional rights to rent to who you want to. You are completely revamping the playing field, and you are encouraging all sorts of litigation. You are destroying social trust and social cohesion. You're making it more difficult for people to associate, to work with, to hire, to rent to people just like themselves.
Down on men or whatever. And I think that when you do this for year after year after year, over a decade, you get this kind of growing sentiment of young white guys, or even young men in general, who just kind of feel left out, or they feel like they don't have figures to look up to, or they feel like they're constantly being told they're not good, they're toxic, et cetera, all the time. And when that happens, you get this hunger from that group of people to find figures to look towards. Jordan Peterson filled that role originally, and now it's like all these red pill spaces and Andrew Tate that are kind of exploding and filling that new void.
And what's the best way?
And that's incredibly shallow analysis that, it's only this new, anti-white element of the diversity industry that is a problem. but it was always there from the beginning of the civil rights legislation passed in 1965. You had the supersession of our original constitution with this new civil rights complex constitution.
You find it disarming, a lot of their arguments?
I mean, it depends on the person. I mean, none of their arguments are based in very good data. So if somebody wants to sit down and actually go through studies, that could be
if their arguments aren't based in any good data, I mean, why aren't they allowed access to cultural mainstream discourse where they can put their arguments forward? Right? If their arguments are based on bad data, then why isn't the first response to these distant right arguments responses based on data? But they're rarely responses based on data. Instead, they're responses saying you're a bad person, you're this name, you're this. Just it's the retailing of slurs to put people down, right? If they had the data, right? If they had facts on their side, you'd think that they'd use them. Right? Let's take a quick look here at the Sean Hannity show.
Take a look.
I'm still kind of reeling from the revelation that Michael Cohen stole money from the Trump organization, and that wasn't, at least to my knowledge, that the prosecution didn't get that out earlier.
The prosecution has painted Michael Cohen as sort of this bumbling, pathetic character whose only sins were his misguided, undying loyalty to Donald Trump. But now you see something a little different. Now there's an argument to be made that actually you're just an opportunistic thief.
The fact that he was never charged with larceny is important because stealing $60,000 through fraud, which would be larceny in New York State, is more serious of a crime than falsifying business records.
They knew about this. They minimized it. The prosecutor misled this jury. That's what I would argue.
Are you allowed to say that?
Yes, sir. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, even fake Jake didn't give opinion, left-wing opinion for a minute. Anyway, unfortunately, one particularly deranged MSDNC host.
So even the Murdochs regard Sean Hannity as particularly lowbrow, particularly unintelligent.
We got Michael Cohen to agree that yes, he stole $30,000. Later, when Cohen was asked about that on redirect by the prosecution, it didn't really sound like stealing $30,000. It sounded a lot like Michael Cohen.
Welcome to
doing
Brandon.
the little that he could within that calculation to rebalance the bonus he thought he deserved, and it still came out as less than the bonus he thought he deserved and the bonus he'd gotten the year before.
Now, let's go.
Okay, here is a much more intelligent analysis from Nathan Cofnas, a philosopher at
suppose
Cambridge
our
University.
Species originated in Africa. Whatever it is that makes us unique, language, morality, sophisticated political organization, all of it had evolved in a population of African hominins by at least 200,000 years ago. 50,000 years ago, some people left Africa and went on to populate other continents. Groups all over the world, including groups within Africa, faced different conditions, which subjected them to different selection pressures. In some places, it was a fitness advantage to be short. In others, to be tall, or to have skin that absorbs more or less ultraviolet light, or to breathe at high altitudes or at sea level. Groups that were separated by distance or geographic barriers formed more or less isolated breeding populations. Because gene flow was limited, populations were able to accumulate adaptations to their unique environments, which led to divergence of physical appearance. So you can often tell whether people are adapted to desert, snow, or jungle just by looking at them. Like other organs, the brain was also subject to different selection pressures. To survive in the Arctic or the savanna requires people to solve different sets of problems. An Eskimo needs to fish in the ice. A Bushman needs to track animals in the desert. Now, we solve these problems primarily by cultural adaptations. There are no genes specifically for ice fishing or animal tracking. Over many generations, people figured out how to do these things by experience, and they transmitted the information culturally. But navigating different environments and mastering different bodies of cultural knowledge draw on different kinds of intelligence. individuals who solve survival problems more easily have a fitness advantage. Because of this, the distribution of innate cognitive abilities became different across populations, and we see differences in average brain.
Right. So if you try to argue rationally, logically, empirically about what Nathan Cofnas is presenting, you're not going to have much success. So instead, people resort to name calling.
Size and structure. The question is, how would we deal with this situation?
So I take it that what you're hinting at is
the term race realism, I think, has two meanings. First is that racial classification makes sense, and that it is rooted in a biological reality. So if race referred to some property which is not instantiated in reality in actual biological populations, then race realism would be false. They would not be correct to divide people based on race. On the other hand, if it does correspond in the right way to some biological reality, then we would say race is real. Race realism in this sense is correct. The other meaning of race realism, which is the way I use it, is that not only is race real and racial classification a sensible way of dividing us biologically, but race is correlated with important traits such as intelligence. And so race is sociologically relevant, not just because of how we feel about it, but because of differences that exist independently of us.
So let me hone in on that first question. If race is...
Now, my view is this is a very pompous way of describing what is, in fact, a semantic question. It's not a metaphysical question. It's a semantic. We've got this word race. We use it to communicate in certain contexts. Biologically informed commentators have largely agreed on what it was supposed to mean until the waters were muddied by a lot of people kind of trying to create confusion so that in my view, political reasons. Now, there's no truth of the matter. There's no objective truth how race ought to be defined. So those philosophers who are searching for the true definition of race, either implicitly or explicitly, I think are not doing something that I find important or on the right track. So
people can't take him on logically, rationally, empirically.
We look at genetic clusters. So you take the whole human population. So we're all one species. And you divide people into two clusters, which are most closely related to each other. So you can divide them into 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If you just do 2, then it's like you separate the sub-Saharan Africans from everybody else. And then if you add more clusters, then the Caucasians form a cluster, Australian Aborigines, Australasians form a cluster, East Asians form a cluster. Basically, if you have like 5 to 7 clusters, basically corresponds to common sense racial classifications, which indicates that the racial classifications, racial categories that are used in common speech do largely track ancestry, which is what race is supposed to track. And so now there are some exceptions. There are some racial categories which really are kind of arbitrary and confused. I mean, none of them are perfect. Categories like Hispanic in the United States are obviously not really based on biological reality. Black includes, I mean, it's used in different ways in different societies. You know, in America, if you're 1/8 Black, you can call yourself Black, which is sort of, they have different rules in Brazil and in other countries. But largely common sense racial categories track ancestry, which was what they're supposed to track. And therefore, this largely vindicates the common usage of race.
So I'm really glad that you said that this is a semantic problem rather than a metaphysical problem, because That's the first thing I was going to argue in my objections. I was going to say, this is not a metaphysical problem. You can't discover some underlying metaphysics or deep science.
If everyone's the same, do we still have these disparities? Now, yes. Well, there are a few things that you can say. I don't think that is a an outcome that we really need to worry about. And yes, I mean, if you can imagine it, I guess it's possible, right? So people learn about differences and then they decide to go around murdering people of another race. Now that will also have to be weighed against the dangers of continuing with the noble lie, which is that as these disparities are going to be blamed on the better performing race, or better performing with respect to some outcome people care about, and that is also creating a lot of racial tension, and nobody knows exactly where that's going to lead. Because it's not only the hereditarians who have a record of mass murder. Right? The egalitarians and the blank slatists have, in fact, a higher body count than the Nazis. Whether I'd rather I'd rather take my chances in somebody's attic in Nazi Germany rather than Mao's China or Cambodia. But some other relevant facts are that there's never been a genocide based on actual scientific data about race differences. The Nazis, they didn't even believe in Darwin. They believed in world ice theory, this bizarre creation story. And they didn't believe that races were related to each other. They denied IQ testing because they didn't like the results. They said IQ testing is a tool of world Jewry to subjugate them. They're notorious pseudoscientists in anthropology. It was just pseudoscience, ideologically motivated pseudoscience. Now, the fact that ideologically motivated pseudoscience in the service of a genocidal ideology was associated with genocide, in my mind, doesn't tell us what would happen if we, in our society, in a responsible way, confronted some of this information. And look, most people accept the fact that not all individuals are born to be an Einstein. There's some people who are just limited, and there's zero evidence that anybody wants to murder the less intelligent. Within, just looking at whites, within the white race, so-called white race, nobody wants to murder. In fact, in the United States, they give way more funding to so-called special education, which means for the low IQ, than for gifted education, because everybody cares about taking care of those who are less well endowed. So I just don't see why one would think, you can imagine it, that somehow learning about race differences triggers this chain of events leading to some horrible outcome. Yeah, I can imagine it. I just don't see any reason to think that's going to happen. And I do see a reason to think that something bad is going to happen if we continue denying the differences, living with these disparities, and as I said, we don't know where that is going to lead to.
So, as you can see, probably on the show, at least one of the hosts of the show disagrees. How does the Academy generally respond to positions that don't conform with the egalitarian premise?
So the main strategies are retracting papers, firing editors, obviously not hiring the person who talks about the politically incorrect idea in the first place, or if they do get hired, then to fire them. And then also social media smearing and that kind of thing. So I guess those are the 5 strategies. Now, the missing strategy is, of course, engagement, discussion, talking about ideas, looking at evidence. That rarely plays a role when it comes to controversial issues in philosophy. So, as listeners may know, I published a paper in Philosophical Psychology in the end of 2019 called Research on Group Differences in Intelligence, a Defense of Free Inquiry. So it's partly framed as a response to Janet Karani, professor at Notre Dame, who published a paper in Philosophy of Science saying that research on cognitive differences should be restricted. So we shouldn't be allowed because it's too dangerous. If people would find out some information about differences in intelligence, that would have terrible social implications. So we should not be allowed to do that. Just like we have restrictions on, publishing instructions on how to make, bioweapons. which are, I think, reasonable. So we should have the same thing for dangerous social science. So I was responding to her, and a number of very prominent scientists and philosophers have said that we should not study intelligence differences. It's too dangerous. We don't want to know what the truth is. And people like Noam Chomsky and Howard Gardner. Ned Block at one point had said this, but then he changed. I guess he realized that strategy didn't work, so he came up with some philosophical objection why to this research program. So anyway, I published this in December 2019.
Yeah, there's a terms of service rule on YouTube that you're not allowed to say that different groups have different brain size, even though different groups do have different brain sizes.
And as part of the paper, my main goal was just to justify research, to say we shouldn't ban the research. But as part of that, I wanted to make the case that this research is scientifically legitimate. There is something. It's not only racism that would motivate one to care about this problem. So I did talk about some of the evidence for race differences, although I didn't really take a position on it in the paper. Now, there was a campaign led by philosopher Mark Alfano. He started a petition to retract the paper and I guess fire the editors. And then this petition was featured on the Daily News, and it didn't get a very positive response, didn't get that many signatures. It was certainly, the point was to harm my reputation. And in the end, there was a group of philosophers who lobbied the editorial board to publish their reply to me without me being allowed to write a rejoinder. And they also refused to make some very minor revisions that the editors had asked them to do. So the editorial board then went over the heads of the two editors-in-chief and to protest, and they accepted their reply to me, which has said, I'm racist and whatever. And then they said, I'm not allowed to write a rejoinder. Then one of the editors-in-chief resigned in response to that, and the other editor-in-chief was replaced. Many members of the editorial board were replaced, and they hired new editors who promised that they would never do something like that again. It would from now on be a very politically correct journal. Now, I also had an exchange. There's another debate in which I take actually the politically correct position, which is on the so-called Jewish question. So there's a theory which is promoted by American psychologist Kevin MacDonald, who says that Judaism is a group evolutionary strategy, and that Jews have a suite of genetic and cultural adaptations to undermine Gentile society. So that would include high intelligence and conscientiousness and ethnocentrism, and then cultural practices to bind the group together and attack the non-Jews. And he was a professor of psychology, and he published his ideas with a university press, Prager. It was taken somewhat seriously by some academics. So I had an exchange with him and in several journals, including in Philosophia, which used to be called at the time, the Philosophical Quarterly of Israel. So I published a paper about his theory called The Anti-Jewish Narrative, criticizing him. And he published a reply to me in Philosophia, was accepted and published. The day after his paper was published, one of the associate editors of Philosophia resigned. Then the Daily News ran a blog post about how horrible it was that MacDonald had been published. And in the end, MacDonald's paper got retracted despite my strong objections. I wrote an article defending his right to academic freedom in Quillette. I lobbied as hard as I could behind the scenes to save his paper, but I couldn't do it. So I'm regularly smeared, on the Daily News. Daily News ran an article, a guest post saying that I advocate racial segregation in education, which is ridiculous. Not something I said, not something that was scientifically justified. But people in philosophy, they'll just go after you personally if you cross the line.
Well, Nathan, I'm proud to say that Brain Nevada is a...
Okay, let's get back to Decoding the Gurus here. They're talking about destiny, and that he has, too many of these dissident right figures on his show.
A good way to do it.
There's more to say on that, but I think he's he is right there about a lot of the dynamics that he's talking about in regards why Jordan Peterson, why Andrew Tate appeal, right? And he, I think we've talked about this as well, Matt. He contrasts this to the message that the left provides to people in that demographic, and I agree also with the way that he presents that here.
I think what people really need to see on that side is people want to be happy and enjoy life. And sometimes on the left, it's really fucking hard to do that, right? So if I look on the right and I see Andrew Tate, like, what's Andrew Tate telling me? He's telling me, buy a sword, be the master of your own destiny, go get, work, get Bugattis, get bitches, do all this stuff. It's like, okay, well, if I go to the left, what are they telling me? It's like, well, you need to feel bad because you're white and you're systemically oppressing everybody and capitalism is evil and you're privileged and everything you do is just because of your mom and dad. It's like, okay, well, fuck me, right? I feel like the left comes down on you so hard and it makes you feel like shit for everything in society. Like, oh, those shoes, those were made by in a slave shop, or oh, that food that you bought, the person is a victim of capitalism and they probably don't have a pension. It's like, okay. And then on the right, like, you get like all these people that feel really empowering, they drive you further and further. So I feel like on the left, oftentimes I feel like my important role is to show that, like, hey, I'm here, I've got a lot of really progressive beliefs, but I'm a happy person, I live a fun life, like, I make money, I don't think that any of this is evil. And yeah, having like more figures like that, I think would be really important to show that you're not demonizing success and that you can be a left-leaning person and be aware of all these kind of social issues that affect us without being fucking miserable all the time and feeling like you're, an evil person.
Yeah, so when he's, I mean, when he's in this mode, he's very appealing to someone like me. I think he's speaking to something real there, and he's talking about, if you want to win hearts and minds, then it's sad but true. But you have these people like Donald Trump or Andrew Tate, and they're horrible people. They're a bad influence on society, but they are sending the message, which is, you're fine, everything's okay, be a winner, do whatever you want. And you may not like it, but that's an appealing message to people.
Okay, speaking of being a winner, here is Ellen Page, the actress who transitioned into becoming a man. She's being interviewed here.
Joy. The most joy. It's getting out of the shower and the towel's around your waist and you're looking at yourself in the mirror and you're just like, there I am. And I'm not having the moment where I'm panicked. I'm not having all these little moments that used to be just being in a t-shirt. It's being able to touch my chest and feel comfortable in my body for probably the first time.
And commentary on Twitter. Nothing says I'm a man more than getting out of the shower, wrapping a towel around your waist, looking at your mastectomy scars and crying with happiness. Men do it every time. Poor girl, she must have been, well, I don't know if she was abused when she was young, but someone to transition their sex indicates some desperation. You're probably wondering, what is Bibi Netanyahu saying? Okay, saying, we are the most moral army in the world. Right? That doesn't bother me when groups think that their group is the best. I think that's just a very human impulse, right? To think that you're the most moral army in the world. I don't find that in the least bit upsetting, even if it's not 100% accurate. Right, liberal women spend $4,000 to bash sticks on the ground and scream at a rage ritual retreat to help women deal with anger. So this kind of acting out of anger does not help deal with anger, right? It's a terribly useless practice.
The car, the computer, what is it we haven't created? But our brains are going across. There are more, I think, doctors from might come with the best intentions. They also get caught in the trap. So the brain drain, Africa really needs the brains. We are the most intelligent race on the face of the planet. We invented almost everything that made this society and every society on the face of the planet human. And when I mean human, I mean as in toilets, sanitary, everything comes from Africa. The chair, the traffic light, the car, the computer, what is it we haven't created? But our brains are going across. There are more, I think, doctors from might come with the best intentions.
So this is probably fairly adaptive to view your group as the most moral, right? The most upstanding, the most intelligent, right? Everybody should think of their in-group this way. Kemidov in the chat says, I had the honor of being blocked on X by Chris Kavanaugh. So, yeah, I haven't tried to interact with Decoding the Gurus. I tried once to DM with Chris Kavanaugh. He didn't respond, and I just let it go. So they have their hero system, and they're not going to be terribly open to a contrary hero system on the distant right.
As opposed to feeling bad about things. So, you know, when he talks about how he's positioning himself, I don't really have any criticisms there, Chris.
No, and again, so I'll get to the Nick Fuentes stuff, right? But so in terms of how he frames it, so this is him, you know, talking to a mainstream journalist about like why he interacts with people like this. And actually, this journalist that he's speaking to is a bit of a Dave Rubin, Lex Friedman type. So, but in any case, they ask this question.
I know that you've at some point collaborated with Nick Fuentes, who's a very controversial person. Now, I want to know what your stance is on bringing certain people onto your platform and giving them exposure, albeit you're, you know, contending with them and disagreeing with them and maybe raising really good points that go against what they're saying. What do you think about giving them?
So giving them exposure means that you talk to people, right? I didn't realize that simply interviewing people was platforming them. Right, and Nick Fuentes doesn't need exposure by Destiny. All right, he's got enormous following all on his own. So it's kind of a weird perspective to put this in terms of platforming dissident thinkers.
I would say another, like a microphone.
It's a very, very, very challenging balancing act, but I'll tend to hear out most people with kind of like that open mind philosophy, like come in, talk to me, and then I'm going to try to tell you why I think you're wrong while being as empathetic or understanding as possible. Something unique that I provide that I think is really important to some of these alternative communities is I'm like the only person that is progressive that like isn't fucking unhinged. And I think it's really good sometimes to show people that like, hey, you can be pro LGBT, you can have like blue hair, be in like weird relationships or whatever, but I can be like a funny, cool, charismatic, like we can have fun and chill, and I can be like understanding of you and not be like super judgmental or try to cancel you and be horrible. For a lot of people, I think that seeing somebody like that on my side is really important because the representation for progressives is absolutely fucking dog shit right now on the internet.
Well, he does sound a little bit unhinged sometimes.
Well, yeah, but yes, he does. But he's, you know, here he's kind of casting it that like, especially in comparison to the people that he's talking about, you know, also the very fact that he's able to roll with them in a way, like, you know, appear with Andrew Tate or whatever and kind of.
So normally Decoding the Gurus is very down on anyone who would platform, say, a Nick Fuentes. This is the most open they've been on this issue, because Destiny framed his position so effectively. So we don't get to control other people, but we do get to influence them. And if we put forward more eloquent arguments, right, if we say things in ways that people are able to hear, right, we're more likely to influence people than if we're just obnoxious or incompetent.
Punch back and whatnot, that this gives an impression of like not the scolding left, but as like, you know, a kind of, yeah, the left is edgy and it's just saying stop being a dick to women and stop giving rich people extra money and all that kind of thing, right? That's
like edgy alt leftism, not deplatforming and not out of the academy.
Exactly, and he's making that exact argument.
So to some extent, when I'm platforming other people, that's a thing that I'm keeping in mind. There's a lot of those communities.
I mean, how insecure do you have to be in your own perspectives or in your own position that having a discussion strictly on the basis of facts and logic, right, is completely unacceptable if the person's outside the Overton window?
That I've interacted with who I'm like the first positive representation of like a left-leaning person they've ever seen. That's one thing. A second thing is, if I am platforming somebody like that, I'm trying to make sure that everybody understands where I'm at. Like, I'm not just having the person on to like laugh and giggle and like play games. Like, generally, like with Fuentes.
Right. So the point of view that Decoding the Gurus normally takes on this perspective is essentially the zombie bite theory of information, that if people simply hear a dissident right perspective, they will be zapped by it. They will be controlled by it. It will lead them down a very dark path. And we did not evolve to be gullible. Right? We just don't, buy into any BS. All right? It's not like there's this podcast that's going to come along and just turn our lives upside down. Right? People will choose a left-wing perspective or a right-wing perspective depending on if it already aligns with their pre-existing values. Right? It's not going to turn left-wing people right, and podcasts are not going to turn right-wing people left.
Because there was a lot of debating, a lot of arguing over different points. So hopefully, one, I can demonstrate to his audience that there are at least some arguments on the other side. And then two, my audience can see the arguments I'm having, and then they've got like more tools to like deal with that type of stuff in the future.
Yeah, I give some credit to that point of view, because one of the things I learned on Twitter, and the interesting thing about Twitter is you just, you bump into random people all over the world. And I've bumped into my fair share of right-wing Americans, or internationally, people that are very, very right-wing. So in a Patreon show, the Decoding the Gurus host noted that their biggest fear is that their academic dean will get an email saying that they've said something that's unacceptable in the academy. So this is their biggest vulnerability. This is their weakness. They don't want to venture outside of the approved hero system, out of the Overton window. And so they have a great deal of trepidation about saying anything that might provoke letters to a dean that says that they are corrupting the youth. And they generally stumbled across me just because I'd made a funny joke or something like that. And then they said something that was funny. There was no mention of politics. And then a little bit later, so they already decided they liked me. And I thought they were fine too. And then they find out that I'm not a conservative. My political opinions are in their mind associated with this stereotype they've got of the bleeding edge progressives. And I can tell that they're a little bit fascinated by me because I seem like a normal person. And that in itself surprised me, and that you cannot, like, there is truth to that, which is that in large segments of the United States and elsewhere, people are operating on kind of crazy stereotypes of each other because... Yeah, why do we have these crazy stereotypes of each other? Because it requires work. It requires empathy to try to understand the world as other people experience it and as other people see it. And we're all energy economizers. That's the impression they get from the news, I guess. So I think I just want to give him credit. I think there is validity to his argument there, which is going on those, talking to Dave Rubin or whoever, right? These, just being even just a little bit funny, right? That is a helpful thing to do.
Though, here's the counter argument. So
yeah, why do people have the crazy idea that feminists aren't funny? Why do people think that wokesters aren't funny? What a crazy idea. I mean, is there any real world empirical support for this perspective?
Like, let me just play a clip of him talking to Nick Fuentes. Okay.
Right. If Nathan Cofnas went on Decoding the Gurus, do you think that they would shred him? No, they would never allow him on their show because they probably, could not compete with him in strict terms of facts and logic.
Okay. This isn't even one of those like super debate things. This is like him on his stream talking to Fuentes.
Like, if you're trying to build a big tent conservative movement, you're kind of fucking yourself by at the outset saying that women can't make real contributions to your political movement. Don't you think that's like kind of fucking you? Like, why would you put yourself in that world?
Yeah, I've heard that from people on my side. People are like, you're excluding 50% of the people in the country from your little movement. But here's the thing, Destiny, is that, if we say that women can't do politics, then women not being in our politics is not like a huge loss. You know what I'm saying? And this kind of gets to the point of like, I don't believe in democracy. I don't believe in let's get half the people.
So let's imagine that all female pundits disappeared. Right? I can't think of any female pundits or public intellectuals in my top 10 list. So there are certainly many female academics doing great work, but if people don't follow female public intellectuals, I mean, how impoverished are they? Right? There is a certain degree of impoverishment but the leading thinkers in most fields of the social sciences and the humanities and the hard sciences are male.
Or even like a plurality or lots of the people, if we get like a smaller percentage of really good, like a really solid demographic cohort, that will be better than if we have more people, you know, or that could be better than having simply more people. It's what kinds of people do you have? You know, like for example, we have a lot of tech guys. A lot of tech guys are very right-wing. You know, and I don't really want to get into that because that's like a whole different conversation. But there's a lot of like crypto tech people that are very right-wing. A lot of like young, white, savant, autistic types are like some of them obviously very left-wing, but some of them very right-wing. And it's like those are high-impact frags, okay? Or high-impact frags.
You can say that, but like look at the type of movement you're building at the end of the day. One, you're gonna have a hard time winning votes if it comes to that point because now you've written off women completely. And two, now you're like even furthering this huge kind of like incel problem or caricature or accurate stereotype of your side because you're literally explicitly excluding women from the movement.
Women are physically more fragile. Women are physically more vulnerable. Women are more conformist. Women are more inclined to color within the lines. These are just obvious empirical facts. So if you're going to have a brave dissident thinker, all right, it would be highly unusual for this great intellectual to be female because women are the kin keepers. Like women keep families together. Women keep us connected to our siblings and to our extended family. Women keep families together. Women look after the youth, right? Women face incentives that are different usually from the incentives that men face because women are physically more fragile. And so the idea that we should expect women to be, you know, just as equally physically brave as men is absurd.
Just want to highlight that, like, they're setting, you know, like the way that Destiny presents it is kind of like, you know, look, I'm going to engage with these people, their ideas exist and whatever. But like the reality is you're sitting down with someone who's waffling on about the Jews, like, you know, controlling 70% or is it 50%?
You guys told me you used to blame the Jews on 70% of your problems, and now it's 30 to 50%. So you seem like you've changed a little bit, Nick. Okay, who knows? And maybe, who knows? Maybe in 2 years, maybe the Jews will only be 20% at fault for the issues in society. Okay, it's a wild world out there. Who knows?
Then, in some circumstances, it's just a whole bunch of people talking like racist, misogynistic shit, and it's like the assholes of the internet.
Oh, and you don't think that Jews tend to blame non-Jews for their problems? Like every strongly identifying in-group blames out-groups for their problems, right? It's not just, oh, these wackos on the distant right who blame Jews for their problems. The English have traditionally blamed the French and the Spanish and the Germans for their problems, right? Americans have blamed Mexicans for many of their problems. Strongly identifying Christians will much more likely blame Jews, blame atheists, and blame Muslims for their problems. If you have a strong in-group identity, you are inevitably going to have a strong sense of victimhood, and you're inevitably highly likely to blame the vast majority of your problems on outgroups. This isn't just something weird that happens on the distant right.
And what you talked about the spectacle is, sure, Destiny's there, like, to argue the left-wing case, and maybe a couple of people are being picked up, but like, really, they're getting a sensational event, like the lefty person enters, you know, to debate free red-pilled guys, and it's not this high-minded thing. It's content, it's drama, and it's like making content with the worst fucking people on the internet.
Really, they're worse than communists. They're worse than Marxists, right? Marxists dominate much of the high ground in culture. On the other hand, I don't have a huge problem with noting that many of these people on the distant right are horrible, right? Many of them have criminal records, right? Many of them are into play acting as Nazis, and it does seem like the overwhelming majority of them are antisocial. Okay, that will do it for me.